This is Criminal Behaviorology, and I am your host, Timothy Joseph. What is criminal behaviorology? Criminal behaviorology combines the fields of behavior analysis and criminology to assist the civil and criminal justice systems, as well as the fields of psychology, sociology, numerous other areas, and for general interest. Today is then June 12th, 2018. Couldn't get the podcast up. Wanted to get it up a couple days ago for your review. Get that podcast recorded. Usually on before the weekend is out. But I was not able to do that, so I'm sorry about that. So we've shown up on a Tuesday. Not a lot in the news on our cursory review. I try not to cover all the shootings that go on. That's a discussion we can have, but I try and I think less media attention on some of these cases might be in order with a discussion about the shootings overall and the increase or decrease of them, the percentages, the facts on the ground. There's been some reports on that, on mass murder, that can be useful for us. And other than that, there's of course there's the diplomacy in over North Korea that's been going on. I think that's pretty eventful. It's been a pretty good week over here, criminal behaviorology. Some people have been checking out the Facebook page. They've been checking out the podcast on Podomatic.com. Have been on now. Is this our fifth episode? Fifth episode, I think. I've got something to talk about regarding genes and criminal behavior, and so after we've been on a little while, we may come back to certain themes. We've covered this before. Back in April 25th, we had a podcast about genes and behavior. In that podcast, I said the following.
And that is just the idea that it could be so simple that we're going to, even though it's not, genes are not simple at all, and behavior is not simple at all, but the idea that we can tap in, find these genes, and we'll find what's causing this behavior. Also, I notice people are very sensitive to the possibility of genetics. It kind of gets to their core, as it were, and I'm not really sure why. But the people, it's kind of the old-fashioned bad blood, or something that might be inside your blood is causing all your problems. It's the interaction with the genetic material in your environment, which can be varied in all kinds of ways. And we can just look at the environment, understand how your genes may be reacting to it. It's the same people do not react the same to the same environment. But there's so many variables, physiologically, environmentally, that it becomes quite a challenge. And the challenge for us is to ferret through all the complexity of it and see how the interaction takes place.
And I still agree with that viewpoint, and there'll be a lot more cases coming up, a lot more information coming up about criminal behavior and genetics. And so I found what I think is a pretty good textbook called Criminals in the Making: Criminality Across the Life Course. The authors are John Paul Wright, Stephen G. Tibbetts, Leah E. Daigle, D-A-I-G-L-E. Criminals in the Making by Sage Publications. and I think this is from 2000. Yeah, it's from 2008. Sage publication. They got Chapter 4, Genetics and Crime, and I'm going to read you portions of that chapter. If there has been a revolution in modern science, it can be found in the journals that hold the studies linking various biological characteristics to human behavior and traits. Diverse fields including neuropsychology, behavioral genetics, and molecular chemistry report daily an almost endless array of important discoveries. These findings have removed any doubt that certain biological features of human beings influence adaptive or conversely maladaptive behavioral styles. At this point, it goes into a little segment which I think is important, the differences between what are called monozygotic twins. Monozygotic twins are formed when one egg is fertilized by one sperm that forms a zygote that later splits into two separate zygotes. Monozygotic twins are often referred to as identical twins. However, not all monozygotic twins are, in fact, genetically identical. In fact, research shows that many, quote, identical, unquote, twins are discordant for handedness, meaning that one twin is right hand dominant and the other is left hand dominant. That's what they mean by discordant. These and other differences between monozygotic twins sometimes can be explained by the developmental process of the twins in utero. Specifically, the timing that twinning occurs plays a role in dictating how similar the fetal environment will be for the twins. Differences in this environment and development may contribute to the differences that are sometimes found across monozygotic twins. Others argue that the twinning process itself, the separation of the zygote into two blastospheres, actually causes genetic changes that result in monozygotic twins being different from one another. Monozygotic twins can be formed in several ways. They give 3 examples. Early splitting of the zygote into two blastocysts can occur, in which resulting monozygotic twins will develop separately. Each will have its own placenta, its own chorion, chorion, which is the membrane surrounding an embryo of a reptile, bird, or mammal. In the case of mammals, which include humans, of course, it contributes to the formation of the placenta. And then, so its own placenta, own chorion, and own amniotic sac. Example 2, the zygote can split later into 2 cell masses within one blastocyst. In this case, the twins may share a placenta and chorion, but may have their own amniotic sac. Number 3, the zygote can split even later during development so that the monozygotic twins share a placenta, chorion, and amniotic sac. So it's giving the identical twins are not all the same, and that is separate from the monozygotics, are then different from dizygotic twins, which are, we often refer to those as fraternal twins. The monozygotic twins are the identical twins, came from the same egg. Dizygotic are essentially siblings born right around the same time. They come from 2 different fertilized eggs, is dizygotic. The authors go on. The influence of these various findings has yet to fully penetrate criminology. Indeed, as we have stated before, linking biological functioning to criminal behavior is still intellectually unpopular among many criminologists. The tide may be turning, but to understand the current state of affairs, we cover in this chapter, just briefly, the history of biological thought applied to criminal behavior. We trace the theorizing that linked variation in biological factors to misbehavior, and the resulting exclusion of biology from the criminological vernacular. For decades, it remained widely unpopular and potentially dangerous to one's career to discuss the roles and functions of biology Yet contemporary science has uncovered too much evidence for biology to continue to be ignored. Thus, after we examine the pitiful history of biology and crime, we begin an examination of the, quote, new, unquote, biological thinking on human development. And what I just read to you is the reason I am reading this chapter to you, because no piece of information, no matter how sensitive it may be or unpopular, should risk the career of the scientist or be impeded simply because it's a sensitive subject matter. Once you start doing that, you're no longer engaged in a study of something. No longer are you being scientific. And they're going to mention that later on in the chapter. So that the way that these issues are responded to, the reactions that they receive, to me might even be more important than the information that is discovered within these individual studies. So what I'm getting at is our reaction to them, and the public's reaction, and the consequences that follow from studying something that's controversial. Examining that might be even more important than what the controversial findings are in the first place. So we'll get to that here in just a minute. We go on with early biological explanations. Early biological theories were developed in what criminologists call the positive school of thought. This school of thought focused on the structure of the human body. Instead of tracing criminal behavior to rational decision-making, positivists trace the causes of criminal behavior to inborn biological traits. Simply put, positives believe that criminals possess certain biological characteristics that made them inferior to law-abiding persons. Early positivist researchers based much of their work on observations. So it should not be surprising that early biological positivists proposed that criminals could be identified via their specific bodily characteristics. Here they're referring to Cesar Lombroso. He is probably best known for his view that criminals represented some atavistic throwback to human evolution. According to Lombroso, scientists could uncover truly atavistic differences through systematic measurement of physical characteristics. Atavistic is an adjective relating to or characterized by reversion to something ancient or ancestral. Atavistic fears and instincts. So in case you were wondering what that was, the term atavistic throwback, yeah. According to Lombroso, they could uncover truly atavistic differences through systematic measurement of the physical characteristics. This atavistic man body type was generally characterized, you may find this familiar, by a sloping forehead, disproportionately long arms, excessively large ears, twisted nose, abnormal amounts of skin wrinkling, and then extra fingers or toes. Everything but the last part. I thought that describes the bad guys that you often see in those old westerns. They seem to have the sloping forehead and large ears and all. I think they pick those out from Lombroso's studies. Actors that look like that to play bad guys in westerns. They go on. Persons who fit this body type, approximately 1/3 of all criminals, were considered to be born criminals. In addition to this, according to Lombroso, according to this criminal type, other types of criminals were also identified. Despite this recognition, these other types, the insane criminal and those criminals motivated by passion, were not seen as being the true criminal type and were subsequently viewed as less serious by Lombroso. Lombroso, who today is viewed as the father of positivistic criminology, was not alone in his belief that biology was a key determinant of criminal behavior. In addition to Lombroso's work, others linked behavior to facial features as well as the shape of the person's head. Franz Gall is mentioned. Physical characteristics aside, early positivists also believed that mental defects were a biologically rooted indicator of criminal propensity. Theoretically, persons who suffered from mental defects or of limited intellect were not thought to be able to distinguish between right and wrong or lacked internal controls over their behavior. We have to remember that early positivists did not have the technical or scientific knowledge available to modern criminologists. This makes it all the more remarkable that positivists also speculated that criminal propensity was passed down through generations. Although positivists' knowledge of genes and genetics was highly limited, they did nonetheless believe that criminal behavior could have a genetic foundation, and that criminal propensity could be transferred across generations within families. Once again, according to Lombroso. Early genealogical studies were largely supportive of this view and did show that crime, like other factors, including intelligence and alcoholism, is concentrated in some families and not in others. We go on to section biological rejection. Biological explanations of criminal behavior dominated the late 19th and early 20th century. However, changes in society during the early 1900s instigated a move away from individual explanations of crime to explanations that focus solely on environmental factors. This shift arose out of a more optimistic view toward crime and criminals. Instead of criminal behavior being predetermined by individual factors, structural theories arose that focused attention on environmental sources of variation. From these viewpoints, individuals committed crimes not because they possessed particular biological characteristics that inevitably led to criminal involvement, but because of their exposure to criminogenic social environments. During the 1920s and 1930s, urban areas underwent tremendous population growth. Instead of providing lucrative job and housing opportunities for the new city residents, however, cities deteriorated. People were forced to work in unsafe factories and live in tenement housing, creating an environment in which families became entrenched in poverty. Two major criminological theoretical developments, the Chicago School and strain theory, were born during this period. Both the Chicago School and Merton's strain theory located the causes of crime outside the individual. For the Chicago School theorists, characteristics of the environment, in particular of urban slums, created a breakdown of societal norms, thus implicitly permitting persons to engage in criminal acts. The breakdown or disorganization fostered the development of delinquent networks that reinforced criminal rather than conventional values. For strain theorists, on the other hand, crime resulted from an inability to attain the conventional goals of society through legitimate means. Much like the Chicago School, Merton's propositions identified societal aspects, namely the lack of legitimate opportunities for all its members and the pervasive belief in the American dream as the primary forces behind crime. Although most citizens desired the prosperity of the American dream, according to Merton, some simply were not afforded the opportunity to achieve the dream. With these opportunities blocked, individuals would seek out alternative ways to get what they desired. These two theoretical schools of thought and the theories derived from them would dominate the field of criminal justice and criminal justice policy alike through the 1960s and 70s. These perspectives helped to ideologically underpin the, quote, war on poverty, unquote, and they helped to justify massive spending on social programs aimed at reducing blocked opportunities and dysfunctional neighborhoods. The 1960s and 1970s were also known for the civil rights movement, the women's rights movement, and the anti-Vietnam War movement. The collective influence of these events is easy to understate. but it is safe to say they influenced every aspect of American society, especially academia. The language of oppression and discrimination captured the social sciences, and alleviating the conditions of the poor and disenfranchised became the focus of many scholars. Unfortunately, this also meant discarding and attacking ideas that might have been used or were used to justify oppression of minority groups. It was during this time period when the rejection of biological explanations of crime occurred. After all, if criminal conduct could be caused, quote, caused by genes or other biological factors, and these factors were disproportionately concentrated in minority groups, then someone might use this information to justify a new eugenics movement, or worse. No longer would biology play center stage and guide research. As time would tell, these forces would practically eliminate biological research into human behavior in the United States. I'm moving on now to a section a little bit later. They give kind of a tutorial about genetics, but I'm going to just skip that brief part of it. Go on. In addition to providing evidence of genetic basis, research has also illustrated the importance of gene-environment interactions. Not only can genetics increase or decrease the probability of particular characteristics occurring, genes can also increase a person's sensitivity to environmental factors. Many children, for example, appear to be very resilient to criminogenic environments, partly because of their genome. They may simply be able to better handle the stresses and strains of living in poverty or of parental abuse and neglect. Other children are not so lucky. Their genomes may make them more sensitive to the stress and strain and more reactive to parental abuse and neglect. Genes further interact with the environment through the mechanisms of choice. The decisions and choices a person makes are not divorced from his or her genetically related personal attributes. Rather, a person chooses options that correspond with, define, and reinforce his or her disposition. Individuals may make choices haphazardly, impulsively, or without conscience. And individuals are very likely to make choices that reflect their proclivities and desires, including choices of friends and sexual mates. The roles of the environment and genes fluctuate over time. The environment in which a person lives is not static, rather it undergoes changes over time. Because genetic expression sometimes requires an environmental trigger, it is possible that behaviors will be manifested differently according to the ever-changing environment. The varying effects of genes and environmental influences are evidenced through the dynamic nature of heritability estimates. Heritability estimates change according to the particular context, samples, and developmental periods in which they are calculated. Recognizing that genes and heritability estimates change over time, developmental behavioral genetics examines the change in relation to human development. Such research has illuminated the changing value structure of the components of variance in behavior as it is examined throughout the life course. An example of a characteristics for which heritability increases with age is IQ, and they reference Plumman 1990. As persons grow older, heritability and non-shared environmental influences evidence increasing importance, whereas shared environment exerts less. Plumman once again. In general, it is not sufficient to know that genes affect behavior. Instead, the complex relationships between genes and the environment in which genes operate must also be considered. That's Plumman R. 1990, Nature and Nurture, an Introduction to Human Behavioral Genetics by Brooks and Cole, 1990. And I think that last statement that I read from the Criminals in the Making book, I very much agree with that, and that's, to me, is similar to what I said in the podcast in April. early on we have some findings from twin and adoption studies, and the authors go over that the importance of twin studies, as we talked about before, is the monozygotic versus the dizygotic twins, the identical versus the fraternal twins, and that can show whether one group has more. What is the genetic influence? You can compare the two and compare genetic influence. And then adoption studies, of course, is how people may be similar to their biological parents, even though they were raised in a different environment. So you can see someone was brought up in an adopted home. In the adoptive home, they have a different environment than what their parents would have been, and yet they show some of the traits of their biological parents. Well, then that's a nod to the strength of genetics. So early findings from twin and adoption studies. Early research attempting to uncover the effects of genetics employed both twin and adoption methodologies. These initial studies found that most traits, like IQ, followed general genetic theory. That is, and they use the initials MZ, monozygotic twins, had the highest concordance rates, followed by the DZ, dizygotic twins. Monozygotic is identical, dizygotic is fraternal twins, and full siblings, followed by half siblings and then unrelated individuals. This finding provided the benchmarks known as the genetic cascade to which other patterns of correlation or concordance can be compared. In addition, findings from these early studies also revealed the importance of heredity across a range of outcomes, including crime. Beginning in 1931, with Lange's twin study of criminality, evidence was found that on average, monozygotic twins had higher concordance than dizygotic twins for criminal conduct. That's Lange, L-A-N-G, 1931. In Lange's study, monozygotic twins had a concordance rate of 77%, whereas dizygotic twins had a concordance rate of 12%. Although this and other studies from this time period found substantial support for the influence of heredity, these studies were criticized for their small sample sizes and their grouping of twins as either MZ or DZ. In attempts to address these methodological weaknesses, others found smaller concordance rates. Other researchers found smaller rates of concordance. Using a large sample size and easily identifiable monozygotic and dizygotic twins, a Danish twin study was an important contribution to the literature on heredity and crime. This study used a sample size of 3,586 twin pairs born between 1881 and 1910 in Denmark. Assessing criminality through both penal and police records, Christensen calculated concordance rates separately for both male and female twin pairs. For both sexes, monozygotic twin pairs had higher concordance rates for criminality than dizygotic twin pairs. With concordant rates of 0.35 for identical male twin pairs and 0.13 for fraternal twins, he concluded that criminality had a genetic basis. The majority of twin studies conducted during this area echoed these conclusions, although the significant difference between monozygotic and dizygotic twin pairs was not found by all. Other early twin studies investigated genetic influence on constructs related to criminal behavior. One construct, psychopathy, has been the variable of interest for a number of researchers, despite using the psychopathic deviant scale of the MMPI, which is a important personality test, the MMPI. Different results have amassed by several researchers. Whereas the concordance rates for adolescent twin pairs were found to be significantly different from monozygotic and dizygotic twins, adult twin pairs did not similarly evidence such a difference. Equivocal results were also found for the genetic influence on children's psychopathic personality, with findings that both support the significance of heritability and show minimal influence. Conflicting results. Along with these twin studies, early adoption studies also tested the importance of genetic factors in the etiology of criminal behavior. Perhaps the most comprehensive data in this area derive from the Danish adoption studies, which include information on 14,427 children who were adopted between 1924 and 1947. My goodness. Using court convictions as the outcome measure of criminal involvement, the researchers found support for a genetic link. And this is Mednick et al., 1984. It was discovered that 20% of the adopted sons who had criminal biological parents and non-criminal adoptive parents were themselves criminal. Furthermore, for full siblings raised in separate homes, there was a 20% concordance rate versus an 8.5% concordance rate for non-related siblings living in separate homes. So they're referring then to the article by S.A. Mednick, W.F. Gabrielli, and B. Hutchings. Genetic Influences in Criminal Convictions. Evidence from an adoption cohort in the journal Science, 224 in the year 1984. Later analysis on these same data revealed a genetic influence on chronic nonviolent offending. As noted by Gottfriedson and Hershey, 1990, this and other similar adoption studies are not able to address environmental influences that may also explain similarity in behavior. As such, it is likely that adoptive households produce little variation in terms of their environment, thus limiting the ability of environmental effects to be identified. A study in which this particular criticism is addressed examined sets of identical twins who were reared apart. In this study of 32 monozygotic twins, the concordance rate for antisocial personality disorder was 29%, a rate similar to other twin studies. Okay, now we look at contemporary studies. In a review of research that has been carried out to assess heritability across a range of outcome measures, Plomin, 1990, found that a wide range of behavioral problems, personality disorders, and mood disorders are influenced by genes. Many of these disorders are indirectly related to criminal behavior. For example, schizophrenia and depression have been found to be influenced by genes, although schizophrenia appears to be related more strongly to genetics. Depression and bipolar disorder show a strong genetic influence in studies using the twin method, but less genetic influence is shown in adoption studies. Other research supports the finding that genetics has a significant influence on depressive symptomology. Genetics also has been found to be an important explanatory variable for the co-occurrence of depression and antisocial behavior. From a national sample of 720 same-sex adolescent siblings, O'Connor et al., 1998, determined that just under half of the variability in depressive symptoms and antisocial behavior is due to genetic influences. Perhaps the most research on heritability has been targeted on cognitive abilities. Early research focused primarily on the genetic basis of IQ. The finding that IQ is significantly influenced by heredity has been a part of the long-term debate on the topic. Both adoption and twin data reveal that IQ has, in addition to an environmental basis, a genetic basis as well. Overall, despite minor departures, the majority of this research estimates heritability to be approximately 90%. Also, important research on the heritability of IQ has provided evidence that the influences of genes fluctuate over time, with heritability and IQ increasing during childhood. Other factors related to IQ has also been found to be explained by genetic influences. Creativity, school achievement, and learning disabilities are also determined at least partially by genetics. Notably, deficiencies in IQ and its corollaries are risk factors in the etiology of delinquency. Personality characteristics has also been shown to have genetic roots. In fact, personality factors usually show strong, consistent heritability effects ranging from 30 to 70%. Traits such as alienation, control, and traditionalism, as studied through an adoption and twin combination method, are each highly heritable. So they do a percentage of how heritable or gene influenced a particular trait is. A separate study of 707 sibling pairs was conducted to determine the extent of which genetic influences on the three domains of positivity, negativity, and control. Of the 18 composite measures, all but 3 showed some genetic influence, with non-shared environmental influences also being evidenced. Overall, approximately 1/4 of the variance of 3 outcome measures could be accounted for by genetic differences in the children. Temperamental factors also have genes to blame for at least part of their genesis. The temperamental characteristics are one of the main areas influenced by genetic forces. Impulsivity, for example, is one aspect of personality that is heritable and subsequently related to delinquency and crime. Temperament, when viewed as patterns of social responsiveness, has been found to be at least partially dependent upon genetics. Perhaps most notable regarding temperament, it is the potential to evoke particular responses from actors in the environment. That is, a genetically influenced trait of being difficult, they got difficult in quote, may serve to create responses from the parent that have implications for development. In this sense, it is not that parents have an innate parenting style from which they always retrieve behavioral responses. Rather, they react to the children depending upon their given genetic capacities and their environmental supports. Along with traits that are influenced by genes, behavioral precursors to delinquency and crime have been integrated into behavioral genetics research. Three specific constructs have been examined. Three specific constructs that have been examined are hyperactivity, conduct disorder, and ADHD, which is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, is ADHD. For boys and girls between the ages of 8 and 16, approximately 70% of the variation in hyperactivity is attributable to additive genetic effects. Genetic effects are also consistently found for conduct disorder. The influence of genetics on the occurrence of ADHD has been confirmed in multiple twin studies, so much so that ADHD is now believed to be a purely genetic disorder. Of further interest, researchers discovered that genetics also plays an important role in the stability of antisocial behavior. They found that stability coefficients for antisocial behavior were 0.61 and that the level of stability was largely attributable to genes. Stability is created and or sustained through genes and shared environmental influences, whereas change is created and or sustained primarily through genes and non-shared environmental influences. By finding that non-shared environmental influences can lead to change in behavior, behavioral genetics research has lent support for the developmental perspective of crime. That is, despite or because of certain genetic characteristics, other influences such as local life circumstances will interact to determine the changes in a person's life. In conclusion, this area of research has recognized the importance of both the environment and genetics. In doing so, behavioral genetics research has provided a mechanism by which the variance in traits and behaviors can be decomposed. Accordingly, genetic influences appear to have moderate to substantial effects on certain behaviors, personality, and temperament characteristics and disorders. Shared and non-shared environmental influences have been found to be important sources of variation in behavior. Pardon me, I had to get a drink there. Between 20% and 30% of the variation in personality, psychopathology, delinquency, and alcoholism appears to be environmentally influenced. More often than not, however, non-shared environmental influences appear to be more important than shared environmental influences. The importance of non-shared environmental influences in explaining variation in antisocial behavior was illustrated by Rowe in 1986. In his study of 265 twin pairs, he discovered that shared environmental influences were not significantly related to delinquent behavior, but genes and non-shared environmental factors were. Similarly, other studies have found that shared environmental influences comprise only 5% of the variance in personality and account for 0 to 10% of any behavioral outcome. So they conclude, we chose to limit the debate that surrounds linking biological and genetic influences to criminal behavior for several reasons, but primarily because we have grown tired of defending an area of scientific research. Interesting. Instead, we sought to minimally recognize the history of the issue and then to present the evidence. It is, after all, evidence that should guide science and not the desire to be politically or disciplinarily correct. If the evidence failed to reveal genetic influences on criminality, we would report that, but that is not the case. Genes are always with us. They influence us in ways that are complex and sometimes indirect, but they are always with us. From our point of view, it is better to know how much or how little traits and behaviors are influenced by genetic and biological processes than to remain willfully ignorant of the facts. Only by recognizing genetic and biologically influenced proclivities, such as criminality, can we fully and completely understand complex human behaviors. Understanding these influences does not rule out or mitigate the influence of social processes. Quite to the contrary, they highlight them. In the next few chapters, they speak about the next few chapters where they pursue some of these other issues. That's a bold conclusion and a bold chapter, and I wholeheartedly agree. There should be no politically correct factor, or concerns about the sensitivity of a material that should prohibit research into an area if there is evidence to that effect that can be pursued. As I said before, the influence of other factors into a scientific process, I don't think is a good thing if it interferes with getting correct facts out there and interferes with presenting data that is significant. I have said before that if there was a battle between those that believe environmental factors versus genetic factors of who actually won, I would say the geneticists have in a sense won, because they've stayed in the game. There was an effort because of movements a few decades ago to completely eliminate the possibility of genetic influences on behavior, and they were never quite able to do that, which shows that those that observed that there were genetic influences have some staying power, and there might very well be some truth to that. There almost certainly is. And it is the combining of these factors, if we look at criminal behavior, where we look at genetics, we look at the environmental factors, and we can understand the complexity, is the field of criminal Behaviorology. And I have been your host, Timothy Joseph. Thank you.